the prep work that goes with what we've done with the employee, but also with ourselves. I think the way that we come in and we show up in those kinds of situations, like we know they're going to be highly emotional for the person. So I think it's good if we're able to kind of deal with that ourselves and able to come into the conversation and say, okay, I'm in a good place. I've done whatever I needed to do to be in a good place. I've worked out. I don't know what it is, but I can come in and I can, be kind of the rock that this person can also rely on.
Hi, I am Sophie Vo, and this is the Rise and Play podcast. In the show, I sit down with influential thought leaders of the gaming industry to deconstruct how they create the best team and company cultures in order to create the best games. Every episode brings actionable insight to improve your leadership, self-awareness, and emotional management skills. Because becoming a better leader starts with becoming a better human. So, are you ready to unlock your full potential in life and business? Let's begin. Don't just see the future, know the future with today's sponsor Source10. I've talked before about how Source10 is a necessary tool to compete in gaming these days. In short, Source10 empowers studios to build human-centric experiences by unlocking deep, psychological understanding of your most valuable audiences. At a time when we needed to know what our players would respond to, my team and I use Source10 and their product Navigator to identify key psychological insights across our audience for Plantopia. This prompted us to reshape our F2E, for example, promoting a stronger sense of productivity earlier on in the game. And this aligned with our audience's desire for empowerment and accomplishment, resulting in higher F2E completion rates and longer sessions. Source10 Player Intelligence Platform enables studios to unlock the full potential of their games and minimize risks across every stage of the development cycle. Visit go.source10.io that you can find in the show notes for a demo. Mention Rise and Play and receive a free feature, theme, and art style study included with your Navigator purchase, a $20,000 value. Learn why EA, Supercell, Wooga, and more use Source10 to create the best human-centric gaming experiences possible. So hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Rise and Play, and today we will focus on a topic that has been a lot on my mind about how to approach conversation, whether it's with your team, your report, your colleagues, your boss, that are emotionally charged. Because these days, emotions have a place at work, but we find ourselves most of the time not really well equipped or prepared on how to deal with emotions at work. And that's what we will talk about today with my two guests. So Julie Beaugrand and Benjamin Chevalier. So we happen to be free French today, a coincidence, right? So it's not that I designed it. Otherwise we would do this podcast in French, and living also at 3 different regions of the world. So I'm in Berlin today. It's like middle of the afternoon. And Julie is in Canada and Ben is in Singapore. So we are covering the whole globe, but we are French. Before we start and get really in the topic of here, what we want to offer in this conversation today is like, what are the different cases where you will find yourself in your role of responsibility and leadership to be in those emotional conversations, and what are the tools that you can use out of this episode today. But let's begin with our guest. Julie before has been also on the podcast, and also Ben, that I will link in the show notes. But before we start, it's important also to get the context of where you are today. So Julie, if you would like to start, what are you doing these days, and why is it relevant for you to talk about this topic today?
Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. So I am a studio head at Rovio in Toronto. I opened a studio here roughly a year and a half ago. So I've been building up a team. And before that, I was running another studio in Toronto. So this is for the past 8 years. So a big part of my job is interacting with people. And so this kind of situation definitely comes up a lot and has been actually coming up quite a bit even recently in my job. So I'm really excited to dig into this topic.
Thank you. And Ben, what about you?
So I'm one of the co-founders at Mighty Bear Games. It's a game studio based in Singapore. I mean, we have people around the world, but most of the team, the core team, is in Singapore. As part of the founding team, I do a lot of leadership work, mostly on culture. I have to set culture in the studio. And recently, we've had quite a bit of transition happening in the studio, going from, a free-to-play, mobile-first games developer to a fully cross-platform subscription model focused games developer to a Web3 games developer now. And we're even introducing generative AI in our production pipeline. And all of these things require a pretty pretty strong, I would say, change in mindset, which requires sometimes also a change in leadership style. So that's where we're at right now. We had a lot of pretty difficult conversations recently.
So I would like to approach the conversation today through a case study. So different situation where we'll start with the example. And if you have experienced those examples, to share your experience, how you have approached it, and maybe some actionable solutions that you can offer to the audience. So I think one, especially by the context of your position, and I experienced it as well when I was building a first casual studio at Vodou starting in 2019. New venture, new business, or pivoting a company strategy. So basically hiring people for a job or a mission, and that mission is changing along the way. And you have to explain this to people, and then there might be losses in the way. And how do you handle those conversations and minimize, let's say, the collateral damage? So who would like to start on this? And of course, if you can share about it, what have you experienced and how have you approached the situation?
Yeah, I can certainly share on this because, like, as a new studio, so we opened roughly a year and a half ago, and what we set out to do a year and a half ago is very different from where we're at right now. So there's definitely been changes. We've launched prototypes, we've launched games, we've killed them. We've made some pretty substantial changes in direction. And of course, like, that's a lot, and that's a lot for people to handle. And usually, as a leader, you get some time to deal with that. So you get some information, you take some time to process it and to figure out, okay, what's next and so on before you talk to the team. But then when you talk to the team, well, that's all fresh news to them. So I think being really open and transparent. Usually when there are changes, it's not about saying everything's been bad before, and that's generally not the case. There's really good achievements and hard work that's been done. So being really transparent about that, but realizing there might be other factors that come into play that require the change. So really being very honest with people, and also just looking forward and opening that to the next step so that people also have something to look forward to. And then I think a key component is giving people time. Again, like, we sometimes ourselves realize that we need time to process things, and giving people time and space to feel what they have to feel, grief, anger, whatever it is, like, that they have to put something behind them, which is totally healthy and normal. And so giving people some time to do that between, like, when you share information and then maybe having some follow-ups and checking in with people individually, I find has been really helpful. So being honest and direct, giving time and following up, I find helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. And I want to comment on what you just shared. Also, I'm in the middle of it with a new company, like new first mobile studio at PlayStation. It's a whole story by itself. And something that I find really challenging is the timing and the time that happens between all the sequence of events, right? So when you know that you have to change something, you are processing it as the person part of the management, of leadership, and then you have to deliver the news. And when you are in a startup mode, this time could be like sometimes in the same day or in a few days, sometimes a week. And I find this actually being the heart of the problem, when time has value when you have to process things and then even have clarity on what you do and preparing the plan for what's next and then delivering the news. So I see here it's a challenge also of discipline. And how do you discipline yourself to do this? There's a temptation, like sense of control that we all have. We want to solve it now. And we know, like, we are still hiring for the old mission. There are things that are happening every day, or where people that are working on something, really putting their heart into it. And you know it yourself. A week from now, it will be thrown to the trash. So how do you discipline yourself to process the things and then deliver in the right time? How have you done it, Julie?
I think in my case, it starts with having that self-awareness of whatever I'm feeling, because usually I will have a strong reaction when, I don't know, I've had cases, things that are outside of my control. There's a new imperative that's coming from, HQ or whatever it is, and you have to deal with it. You don't really have a choice. And so I will certainly feel my feelings about it on my own or with friends or with, like, people that can be trusted on that, and give myself some time as well so that I can process it and see and figure out my next steps. And usually, honestly, because usually I have a gut reaction. My reaction is like, I want to go. I want to say something right now. I want to share it. And I have to have that self-awareness to say, okay, no, slow down. Things that seem very dire in the moment can seem like much less of a problem if you give it even just a night's sleep, a nice rest. So applying, what I give to other people to myself, just giving myself some time to process whatever I'm feeling, and then some time to also go back and attack the rational part of my brain to figure out, okay, what are we actually going to do? What can I do? What's in my control? And what can I do? And figure out plan that really helps, I think, moving forward.
And Ben, what about you as well? Because you have also a different situation where I think since we've known each other, I know that you've been in through changes like 1-2 years, and so you've been quite familiar with it. How it's been the situation relating to what Julie has shared? Has it been that easy, similar, or you had a different approach?
I feel we have a fairly similar approach about being open on what is at play essentially when we're introducing a huge change. Could be market related, could be us failing at something, maybe a product. There are multiple reasons, and I think when we say now we're going to have to do something about it, and maybe it's going to be as drastic as pivoting the entire company into something else, I think for us what's been really important is to be very clear on the deepest motivations of the studio as a company and the costs and consequences of acting or not acting. So we expose those things like this is what's on our mind. And sometimes very early, like with Web3, we had like two good products on Apple Arcade. We had revenue streams, but we could see as well that Web3 was coming up, and we had a choice, which is do we act on these? Do we look at it, from afar and just let other studios, figure it out, or do we want to be part of the ones who are going to figure it out? And what are the consequences of ignoring it or jumping into it and being like, what can we do with that tech? And of course, it's in the middle of something where people hated Web3, especially on the games development side of things, especially around artists, creatives. And so it's been very difficult to explain, this is why we think this is important. And the reason we think it's important is because free-to-play is going to be increasingly difficult for smaller studios. You have to have much bigger pockets, much deeper pockets. We had a free-to-play title with really good metrics, but we had no one to actually help us with financing the marketing, essentially, the costs that are associated with marketing. And so we decided that Web3 was a really good avenue for us to maybe be at the forefront of something that looks like a potential future for the industry. It doesn't replace anything. It comes as like, these are new features. There are new things that you can use to make your games and elevate the experience of players. But within the team, explaining the change was, I think we had to be very clear about how we would do that in alignment with our values and our principles. And as long as whatever we're doing is going in the same direction, the team was generally fairly okay with that. So there was a lot of education to be done on what is Web3, why is it not just scam, like what is the tech, how can the tech be used to improve experience, like gaming experience. But beyond that, I think it's just the mindset of the team that is required. People have essentially to trust as well our intentions as a leadership team. Like, are we trying to scam people or not? It's like this thing with Web3 that was like, we had like really good sessions of feedback. Like, why are you going into Web3 as a studio? Like, are you going to scam people? Are you like, and the same thing right now with generative AI. What are we going to do? Are we going to steal people's work? It's like, no, we care about copywriting. We care about people's work. Well, we would never steal anybody's work. Like, why? So, and there are ways to actually implement those things in a very ethical way. It's just not known. It's just not part of the discourse outside. So you have to explain, all right, this is what you can do with the tech. This is how you can approach that. Just to like go back to your original questions, how do you approach that? You need the right mindset on your team. People that are curious, people that embrace change, people that can make something that is maybe a bad event into something positive, a learning, risk taking. Like, you have to have this kind of mindset because you can't pivot if you don't have that. You have to essentially let go people, and you don't really want to do that. You want to onboard people in the vision because the vision is aligned with your principles and your values. Fundamentally, we haven't really changed. We make different products, but we're the same people.
Mm-hmm. Something that Ben said that really resonated with me is also like what you said at the end, like turning a seemingly bad situation into a win. And like this idea of making lemonade out of lemons is so powerful, and it's great. And it's so true. There are actual times when a terrible situation that can be really distressing in the moment can actually turn out to be a win. Yeah. Like, give it 3 months and it's actually that caused Absolutely. You to take another direction, and you're like, wow, I'm so glad that happened. It felt horrible in the moment, but I'm actually really happy with where it brought me. And so it's hard to see in the moment, but actually like remembering that is really powerful.
I think that's like essentially taking a hard decision. Right? You go through taking a hard decision a few times, at a project level, at the individual level, at the leadership level, when you get to make a hard decision at the studio level that will impact everyone else, there is already a sort of learning curve that people went through that makes them more willing to actually take that change and be like, yeah, I remember what happened the last time we had to take a difficult decision. Down the line, we realized that was the good one. That was what we needed to do. Sometimes not, and there are ways to approach that as well, right? But generally, you build that mindset, right, within the team, and you can build it in an incremental way. No, you don't have to go and pivot everyone like out of nowhere, right? It's like, of course, we can build that up.
One thing you mentioned also about the mindset of people like to go through, some will bounce or recover or even grow from those changes. So they are fed by this, right? They are excited, and others, they are completely paralyzed. And I think here it's even a question I ask myself, like, what kind of, mindset, I would say mindset, because it's not like good or bad, of people you need at different stages, right? So you do need a super specialist who like stability and predictability. And sometimes they're not necessarily the right fit in early phase where everything is moving. So what has been your approach when hiring? Are you intentional about hiring people who may not be the best experts in the field, but have the mindset and the attitude to go and with you, in this journey that you don't even know you're taking? Or you do a mix and you accept then sometimes it's not a match anymore when you change the trajectory. So how have you approached the hiring? Julie, go ahead.
It's a difficult question because it's true. Like the needs do evolve over the course of a project, over the course of the life of a studio. And so in my case, it was a new studio. And one of the things I was definitely looking for and was very upfront about is like, are you excited by the idea of opening a new studio? Because there's lots of exciting parts. And then there's lots of like, we're going to learn as we go. We're going to build as we go. It is challenging. It is tough in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of experience that comes into play. And then there's just the mindset. And I think growth mindset is a really important one because we're going to mess things up a lot along the way. And just having that mindset where you see that, okay, every mistake, every quote unquote failure is something that's actually helping us get to the success that we know we're building towards. So that's definitely something that I've prioritized. I think I'm still in that phase because it's just a year and a half. We're actually just now entering pre-production. So we're still in the building up phase. So it's something I'll probably see later. But people also come into, I think, these kinds of jobs with expectations and their own career plans, which is totally fair and makes sense. And so, again, the changes along the way may no longer make their plans in line with what we're doing. And yeah, it's tough. It's tough, but it's part of the things you have to accept. Like those are people have their individual needs and they can bounce back or they can go where you're going, but there may come a point where paths separate. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I think, yes, trying to hire people that are adaptable, that can thrive in different parts of the project is important, but also accepting that there's probably going to be changes along the way and that's expected and healthy.
So my next question is, because we have experienced the situation, they happen. How have you handled it? And how much were you aware also of the emotion that of a person where they were? And how have you approached them based on that, a different level of communication?
What's really important, what really matters, is what happens before and what happens after the conversation. This is what makes the conversation. If we take the example, because I have to be more specific, so if we take the example of someone that we're going to part ways with, whatever the reasons are, I think what matters before the conversation is that we've always given them the right feedback, that they had a very clear objective, that they always had timely feedback, that they always understood where they were, how they were doing. Because if you get into the conversation and people are surprised, it means that we haven't done our job. Like it means I haven't given the right feedback. That should never come as a surprise if I sit down with someone and say, like, we're going to stop here. Like there is always a build up to that. There is always like reasons to get there. And usually that's why, even if sometimes it's very explicit, sometimes super emotional, we can get past that during the conversation, hopefully let people, get things out as they need to, don't invalidate any of their feelings, and then get to a place where we can start talking about, how can we move forward? I think that the thing that really is required from me is not to spend too much time on the conversation itself, is like, what happened? And, the anger or the unfairness, whatever it is, like, again, not invalidating any of it, but more being very clear, like the decision has been made, and now how do we move forward, and how can I make that easier for you? And then the follow-up, because the conversation doesn't stop there. If I'm parting ways with someone, it doesn't mean that I'm not talking to them anymore. It doesn't mean that I'm not helping them out anymore. Like I trust people, I have respect for them. It has to, things generally for these conversations to go well have to come from a place of caring, and they can only trust that you care for them if you've cared for them for months and years. If we say I care for you, on the moment of the conversation, that's not going to go really well. So all that build up and all those things, that's what matters, and then the follow up to that, because that's how you're going to have good relationships. And I would say it's a better outcome than just someone who's just plain angry, right?
I definitely echo what Ben is saying. Honestly, I get emotional just thinking back about it, because I've definitely been faced with this situation, and it's never easy, never ever easy. Even when like Ben said, and often that's the case, it's the best thing for the company, the team, and it's the best thing for the individual. Of course, it's one of those things, again, that can be hard to see in the moment, but that also can take you on another path to somewhere else. And that's happened to me with someone who was honestly very competent but turned out to be a really poor fit for the team and for the skill set that we needed at that time. And they eventually went on to another great position and are thriving right now. And because I think they're in a place that's much better for them. But it was very tough on the spot. And just because this person was really invested and meant well, was really well intentioned, like everything was good. It just wasn't a good fit. So yeah, in the moment, it definitely did get very emotional, even though there was all the conversations beforehand. I think it still can come as a shock, which is totally understandable. So making room for that, I think, like Ben said, the prep work that goes with what we've done with the employee, but also with ourselves. I think the way that we come in and we show up in those kinds of situations, like we know they're going to be highly emotional for the person. So I think it's good if we're able to kind of deal with that ourselves and able to come into the conversation and say, okay, I'm in a good place. I've done whatever I needed to do to be in a good place. I've worked out. I don't know what it is, but I can come in and I can, be kind of the rock that this person can also rely on to get out what they have to get out. And then I think, as Ben was saying as well, like, okay, things end, but you still offer support. Hopefully, like, you're there for this person. You can help make this as smooth a process as possible for them outside of, the difficult current situation. So yes, it's tough, and it usually can get, I would say it's always a little emotional. Sometimes it's very emotional, and you can't quite control that, but there are ways to at least try to mitigate that and make it as smooth as possible and in a caring way, like Ben was saying.
And something you mentioned, Julie, which is, I think, is a key part of how to handle well those conversations. Emotions are not just on the side of the employee. We are emotional going in the conversation, and there's a responsibility to manage emotionally ourselves first, that we can enter this conversation. Like, have we done everything we could to be prepared? Do we have a clear reasoning? Are we objective in the way we've made the decision? So time is on our side, right? And also, because it's uncomfortable, and I remember myself entering, like, oh my God, I'm really not looking forward to the conversation, being anxious, sweating. This is where the other person can feel this anxiety as well. So the thing you can do is, like exactly you said, being the rock, which is easier to say than to do, but it's like, do whatever you need before to take it out and come to a conversation calm, decisive, and also supportive, which is really hard. It's a lot about self-management. So I think that one as well, I learned that's the best way to help someone, by managing yourself first.
And after, I think I shoveled snow for 2 hours after that. I needed to get out and and deal.
I would like to add to this quickly, because you mentioned something super important. I didn't realize the idea of that rock, right? And to add up to this, and I learned that the hard way, because initially in the first few times, and we're talking about the hardest conversations, which is letting go someone. It's there's not many conversations that are harder than that. Being a rock, essentially not being shaky in your belief in the facts, in the way you're going to approach the conversation, is critical, because even if you feel like that's correct, you're right, this is exactly what happened, this is the best thing to do. If I am shaky, the person I'm talking to will not absorb and will not understand and will not agree, essentially, at some point to okay, that's not a conversation anymore. That's a decision that was made. It's tough for them, but they will at some point agree to that. It's okay, let's move on now. If I'm shaky, it means are you sure about what you're saying here? Are you sure this is what you think? Are you 100%? And that's for me, that led to conversations that went really, really badly, where I felt like I was kind of sort of justifying myself on things that had no bearing in the conversation at all because it became emotional.
We talk a lot about mental health issues at work. I think it has always been there, let's put it this way, but it has been more acknowledged. And where I find the difficulty here is, it could be for different reasons, right? So, someone who's been fine with the change that has happened, like, okay, I understand the rationale, I'm with it. And then a few weeks later, you see them, they are completely drained, almost like burned out, like look burned out. It's a different type of conversation you should have to support the person. And even what you suggest, like, and this is where it's tricky. Is like, is it separation? Is it taking time off? Is it just listening? What has been your experience there when you have highly emotional employees where the conversation was not about finding a solution, but more solving it on an emotional level? And what should you do as a company, as a leader? And where do you draw the line, which has been also a challenge for me through all the conversation with our leaders. So who would like to start? Julie?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a really tough topic. There's something, I think, when things get really emotional, I think it's pretty scientific. Like you're when you're in freeze, flight, or fight mode, you literally can't access the rational part of your brain, so you're not able to have like a fully, and I've been through that. We've all been through that. So also detecting when it's reached like a certain temperature. Let's cool off. Let's pump the brakes, let it sit. Let's talk about it tomorrow, set up a follow-up or something. Just giving it some time, I think, can be really, really helpful. And when it comes to the line, is there a clear line in the sand about what's our responsibility? What's the employees? And I think that's a really tough question because, like, obviously we're here to take care of our employees. We're here, I think, first and foremost to provide a safe, healthy, supportive environment where people can thrive. But of course, like, again, some people are unwell, we all have issues. There are things like, it's really interesting when you talk about like maybe emotional distress or other, like, people will take time off if they have a broken leg or if they have a severe bout of flu, like, kind of no question. I'm not working. I can't come into the office. We don't want you to come into the office, stay home and work. But sometimes we have like a real downtime, which can be linked to work or not. Like, we're going through something personal and that's really affecting us as a person. And, you maybe there you try to push through and like trying to change the culture where, taking a sick day can be about being, physically sick, but also mentally distressed or unwell. Like, that's part of it as well. So trying to shift the culture towards like, it's okay to take care of yourself, like mind and body, because I think that's something that's changing in the zeitgeist today, but we still have a way to go. And so maybe leading by example and showing, okay, well, sometimes like this has been really tough. Like, I need some time to process. I need to go do, and everyone has their own way to do that, and that's their own. So creating an environment where that's okay, I think can go a long way.
Ben?
Yes, I was thinking along the same lines, and it's a difficult topic. I think what you just mentioned, leading by example, is really important. If you expect people to take care of themselves, we have to show that it's okay to take time off when we don't feel good, when we feel like our mental state is going to impact our ability to work. It's very hard, I think, for more junior people in the team to do that because you have also, other kind of pressure that comes with like, I got to show up at work and I got to be there. And I think this is where managers, and again, like culture and, who is talking to those people on a daily basis? So the managers of those more junior people in the team, are they talking to them often enough? Do they understand how they're doing? Like, so one-on-ones are like super important. And what I mean by one-on-ones is just not like a sync up, but really like asking the person, how are they doing, like generally, and acting fast on these things. So not letting things build up. Just as an example, earlier this week, we sent someone on a week off, more junior, didn't realize they were completely burning out, and we were like, whoa, what's going on? And then it was very quick to understand, like, okay, just take some time off, and that's fine. There is always this pressure, like, whoa, how is the work going to happen? How it's like, no one is going to die from that. Like, people are going to step in, they're going to help, they're going to push things around. It's very rare when you ask someone to take a few days off or even a week that things are going to implode. It's very, very rare. I think one of the most important things for me, if it's a very emotional conversation, is to not try to fix things on the moment. And as Julie just said, like, let it sit for a little bit, like just listen first, hear what people have to say, take everything in, let them speak and let them feel like at least they have an ear and they're like, okay, I can express myself here. And let's follow up, on the next day when people have cooled down a little bit more and be like, okay, so what is the problem really? Is that the problem at work? Is that something that we're not doing right? Is that you don't have the support that you need? Like, what is it exactly? We can go to something a little bit more rational, or is it something maybe outside of work, a factor, external factor that affects your work? And based on that, we can take different directions, right, on how we can handle the emotional part. But usually, like, the first expression of the emotion, if it's very strong, we won't know exactly what is happening, because it can mean many things.
And I would like to add here as well some anecdotes or tools I have started to also roll out on a studio level, but also experience. So the first is a healthcare platform, mental health platform. There are many services these days, and it could be part of the company benefits, and it's acknowledging it's there, it's safe, it's anonymous. You have all access to it. You don't have to worry. And you have, so we have one actually called Modern Health. And you can book anytime your coach or your therapist online for a session of 30 minutes during the day or the day after, because in the moment you need to talk to someone in a safe way, and that may not be your manager, right? So this is a great way to support. Second is people are worried when they're going away for some time that they will not receive their pay, or something bad will happen at work, or they will lose opportunities, which I have to say, this as managers, we have to think it's nothing for someone to leave 1 week, 2 weeks, but it's much more costly someone leaving 6 months. So it's better sometimes to encourage people to take some days off a week, because the cost is a real person going through depression or burnout, where the work, unfortunately, is a contributor to it, not the main one. Then this is a much harder situation to get out of for both sides. And something I encourage, if you can, as a company, is to extend the paid leave. And the last that I found as well, which has been an experience for me, was really to switch. So how do you communicate to someone, for example, who's going on a sick leave? They are not capable of returning to work. And that's a very, very tricky situation, because at the same time, you have responsibility as an employer. Let's say it's a role that a producer or project manager, and many people are relying on that person, but there's just no one. It's vacant, but you cannot replace, of course, the person who's away. But then that person also is not capable. And this is where it's hard for us as manager, because it's a complete conversation on an emotional level. It leads to my very last point, where I don't think we are well equipped for this as manager and leads, because here we are having this conversation. We have had experience for many years to, work with many people, different situations, but we are promoting many leads not every day, but months and so on. And those young leads are not prepared. They are not trained to handle emotional conversation. And this is where it trickles down easily when they have to face those situations that are happening one-to-one, and you are not there all the time, right? And this is an open question here at last for the last part of our conversation today. What kind of training or skills should we develop as any managers of today and tomorrow, right? With all the things we've discussed today.
Therapy.
I have
Good one.
I'm not really joking. Yeah, I think because the truth is, in the best working order that we're in, the more we're able to help other people and to understand. And I mean, from a personal point of view, like, coaching has helped a lot. And a lot of the coaching I went through actually had a lot to do with emotions and understanding emotions, and understanding that behind each emotion there's a need, that behind an emotion can be hiding another emotion. Sometimes you're angry, but you're actually afraid of something behind that, and really being able to dig that. So obviously you do that for yourself. That's helped me tremendously, even just understanding what's going on with me and what I want. And then when you can bring that to the table with other people, so teach other people, but also help understand, read situations better. So honestly, yes, I think you're absolutely right, Sophie. I wish there was more support and awareness. I think it probably varies from company to company. Some HR teams are really well equipped to do that, but just if we had more of a coaching culture, especially for people that are going to end up in this kind of situation, who may or may not have, the needed baggage to deal with them as best possible, would be really helpful for people.
Mm-hmm. Great one. Therapy and coaching. I double down on that. That has been very helpful as well for me. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, I actually fully agree on this. I think to help others, we have to have our house in order. Saying therapy depends on the parts of the world, depends, the people you're talking to. But for some people, it feels like, wait, I'm not sick. Why do you want me to go for therapy, right? So even approaching this with different people, I think for a person who's managing, other people, I think it's easier to make it make sense and be like, no, it's not about, fixing you. It's about understanding yourself and then helping others in return. And it makes perfect sense to me. I'm about to go under a session of coaching. You want to lead by example, right? I'm asking my managers to get coached. I'm going to go get coached as well as an executive. It should not be a stigma. It's like, I got a coach. Just, it's not because there's necessarily a problem. It's just for me to work on certain things that I want to be doing better. And same thing for everyone. I think what's important outside of, so I was just saying like, yeah, I totally agree on these points. I feel like if the companies themselves don't have the adequate policies to support their managers, it's very hard for them to do a good job. So you were talking about, let's have, more sick leave, for example. Let's support people with, anonymous therapy, right? Like if they need to talk to someone, like that should be something that the company can help with. But if the company doesn't have that, essentially managers have a lot less tools to work with and a lot less ways to help people. And probably even better if that's possible in our structure, if the managers can be part of the policy making, that's even better because they work directly with people and they're going to use those tools. And so, yeah, I feel like good policies and policies that are built together based on very strong, foundations like principles, values, and all that stuff. Again, that is really, I think, what would help managers in general in doing a good job.
Thank you. So we are out of time for today. There's so much more to discuss. I also reflect on a follow-up session because I really enjoyed the conversation today and I learned a few things or reminder. I hope the same as well for our audience. So let's close it here and then let's follow up on a future episode. But thanks a lot, Julie and Ben, for joining today from the two sides of the world.
Really enlightening conversation. Thanks a lot, guys.
That was great.
Take care.
Thanks, Sophie, and thanks, Julie. It was very nice seeing you.
See you next time. Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Rise and Play podcast. I am trying to grow a community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. So if you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders because we have so much more we can learn from each other. Also, please don't forget to follow the show so you don't miss out on future content. Every episode is packed with actionable insights that will help you improve your leadership skills now. And if you are interested in learning more on the topics that we discussed today, you can find more insights on riseandplay.io, and there you will also find my free masterclass on conscious leadership. So have a great week, and until the next time,